On a bone-chilling winter night, while most were safe and warm in their homes, a little girl named Ella walked down a desolate alley, her loyal K9 partner Rex moving protectively at her side. She assumed it was simply a shortcut home until Rex abruptly stopped dead. His ears shot up, his tail went rigid, and a low growl rumbled from his chest. This wasn't a playful sound. It was a grave warning. "Rex, what is it?" she whispered. Ella's heart hammered in her chest as Rex surged forward, pulling her deeper into the falling snow. "Rex, wait!" she cried out. But the dog was completely focused. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Then she saw them, and her blood ran cold. 2 FBI agents were slumped against a brick wall, their hands and feet bound tightly, a layer of snow covering their still bodies and white foam frozen around their lips. Something awful had taken place. Here, something fatal. Someone had poisoned these agents, leaving them to perish alone in the bitter cold. Ella's voice was a fragile whisper. "Rex, what happened to them?" How long had they been lying here? Who did this? And the most chilling thought of all were their attackers still hiding nearby. She didn't realize it yet, but what was about to happen in the next 10 minutes would change her world forever. The German Shepherd growled again, circling the fallen men, nudging them desperately, trying to keep them alive. His fur bristled. His gaze remained locked on the impenetrable darkness at the end of the alley, as if he sensed a presence still there. Someone watching them. No one could have possibly foreseen what was about to unfold. Stay with us. This story is beyond belief, and what happens next will absolutely shock you. Before we begin, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. And I'm truly curious, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your country's name in the comments. I'm always amazed to see how far our stories travel. The wind cried through the narrow streets, a solemn warning no one was awake to hear. Thick flakes of snow descended from the sky, swirling in the faint yellow glow of streetlights that flickered against the frigid air. It was the sort of winter night where the whole world feels smaller, hushed, almost like it's holding its very breath. And into the center of that profound silence walked a small girl named Ella, bundled so completely in her oversized brown coat that only her rosy cheeks peeked through. Beside her strode Rex, her father's trusted police K9, broad-chested and alert, his own breath appearing in sharp white clouds as he scanned every looming shadow. Each crunch of their feet echoed down the vacant sidewalk. Ella held Rex's leash with both hands, but the truth was, Rex was the one leading her, keeping her steady, secure, and close. Daddy said we would get home faster this way, Ella whispered, mostly to comfort herself. Her voice quivered, not from the biting cold, but from the way the night felt different, heavier somehow. She tugged her hat down and glanced up at the swirling snowflakes that danced like lost embers on the wind. Rex's ears twitched. They were about to take a risky shortcut in alley between 2 towering buildings that stretched into an abyss of darkness. Under normal circumstances, Ella was forbidden to walk through alleys at night, but the storm had arrived much sooner than predicted, and her father had instructed Rex to bring her home with haste. She trusted Rex with all her heart. If he moved forward, she followed. But tonight a subtle shift occurred in Rex's posture. He halted at the entrance to the alley, his shoulders tightening, his tail lowering with deliberate slowness. His breath escaped in a short, sharp huff. Ella looked up at him, her face filled with confusion. "What's wrong?" she breathed. Rex didn't. He gave no answer, but his every move screamed caution. He advanced with deliberate care, the fresh snow yielding under his paws. Ella held back her small heart, pounding against her ribs. The alleyway loomed darker than she recalled, a narrow passage walled in by brick and distant flickering lights. Rex cast a look back at her before his gaze fixed forward again. His intuition screamed louder than the howling storm. Ella swallowed her fear and followed him. For an instant, the wind fell silent as if creation itself held its breath to watch them enter. A knot formed in Ella's chest. The shadows themselves seemed to writhe and lengthen with each step they took deeper into the passage. She couldn't have known it then, but on this frigid, breath-stealing winter night, their very lives were on a collision course, with a terror far greater than the storm. Rex felt at first a silent warning that Ella would soon witness with her own eyes. The snowflakes seemed to grow heavier, spiraling down in lazy circles, melting into the cold ground as they vanished into the ever-deepening blanket of white. Ella's knuckles whitened on Rex's leash. Her world had shrunk to just a few feet ahead. The storm consumed the path before them, yet Rex pressed on. Every step was measured purposeful and laced with caution. Halfway down the alley, he abruptly froze. Not just a pause, but a complete halt. His body became a statue of stone muscles coiling tight beneath, his dense coat of fur. His ears shot up, swiveling, tasting the air. His head cocked once to the left, then snapped sharply to the right. Ella felt the leash go taut in her hands. "Rex," she breathed, her voice a small, white puff in the freezing air. Rex paid her no mind. He raised his snout to the wind, drawing a deep scent and then another. His powerful chest rose slowly, and a low growl began to vibrate from the very depths of his throat. This wasn't his playful rumble. This sound was something else entirely. A warning, protective, primal. A knot of ice formed in Ella's stomach. She moved nearer, laying a trembling hand on Rex's shoulder. "What do you smell?" He inhaled again. Rex's powerful jaw clenched. He took 3 deliberate steps forward, dipping his nose to the snow. And then, his head shot up, whipping to the right side of the alley, his eyes locking onto something completely invisible to Ella. The very air grew heavy with tension. The wind fell away, as if the world itself was leaning in to listen. Ella's heart began to hammer in her chest. Her trust in Rex was absolute. She knew his instinct for danger was infallible. Her own father had always told her, "If Rex reacts, you react with him." She swallowed hard, mirroring his stance. Her shoulders tensed, her eyes scanning the gloom. The long alley stretched into a void of shadows, broken only by weak pools of light from the street lamps above. There was no movement. There was no sound. And still Rex growled again, louder this time. He lunged forward, pulling Ella along gently, but with undeniable force. His pace quickened, each step filled with more urgency. Ella nearly fell, struggling to keep up. Her small boots skidded on the icy ground. "Rex, slow down," she pleaded under her breath. But he couldn't. He was locked onto a trail. Something imperceptible to Ella, but a powerful beacon to his senses. The smell was sharp, unnatural, and wrong. Rex's nose twitched, tracing that invisible path. His tail went rigid behind him, no longer a friendly flag, but a stiff, straight line. Ella's breath caught in her throat. A cold tendril of fear snaked its way up her spine. She risked a glance behind her, half expecting a shape to lunge from the shadows at their back. Rex let out a single bark, sharp, loud, and commanding. Ella flinched. Whatever he'd found was close, far too close. And whatever this was, Rex was pulling her directly toward it because 2 precious lives now depended on him. Rex's paws, their pace quickened each step, a sharp crunch in the snow, a frantic rhythm that hammered in Ella's chest. The deeper they plunged into this alley, the darkness deepened, swallowing them whole. The streetlights behind them bled into a faint glow, devoured by the swirling storm. Ahead, only a world of chilling shadows and dancing flakes. And then Rex froze dead in his tracks, but this time it wasn't hesitation. It was pure alarm. He dropped his head low, the fur along his spine standing on end, and a deep guttural growl rumbled from his chest. The kind Ella had only heard once before, the night he'd kept a dangerous stranger from shattering their world. Ella froze, her body rigid behind his gripping, the leash with hands that betrayed her fear. "Rex, what is it?" she breathed. He didn't answer. He moved 1 deliberate step forward, then another. each one placed with the focused precision of a soldier. Ella forced herself to follow, her legs trembling, terrified of what she was about to find. And then the wind turned. A strange, sharp odor clawed at her senses, harshly, chemical, and bitter. It burned the back of her throat. She choked back a cough, her mitten pressed to her face. Rex's growl intensified, and that's when she saw them. At first, they were just two dark shapes huddled against the brick wall, nearly lost in the snow. But as Ella crept closer, her breath caught in her throat. Her gloved hands shot to her mouth. They weren't just shapes, they were people. Two adults. No, two officers. Their jackets, thick and dark, were caked in frost. But the bright yellow letters emblazoned across their chests were unmistakable. FBI. Ella lurched forward, her eyes wide with disbelief. The agents were slumped lifelessly against the wall, bound from chest to knee with heavy ropes. Snow had drifted into their laps and collected around their boots. Their heads were bowed forward, as if lost in that terrible space between sleep and oblivion. Are they okay? Ella whispered, her voice a fragile tremor. Rex didn't wait. He surged forward, anxiously sniffing their faces, nudging their gloved hands, a desperate whine caught in his throat. And that's when Ella saw it, the detail that made her blood run. Ice cold. Foam. A ghastly white foam clung to the corners of their mouths, frozen solid by the wind. Their lips were turning a deathly shade of blue, their skin an ashen gray. A horrified gasp escaped Ella's lips as she stumbled back. Poison. Even a child could recognize the signs, not from experience, but from the grim warnings her father had drilled into her for emergencies. Her knees gave out, and she collapsed into the snow. Rex, they're hurt. She breathed the words, barely audible. Rex nudged the first agent, more insistent now, whining louder, pacing frantically between the two still forms. He threw his head back, his barks echoing into the empty alley, a desperate plea for anyone to hear, but only the storm answered, swallowing the sound. Ella crawled closer, her hand reaching for the woman's ice-cold arm. The agent was utterly still. Ella shook her shoulder, and the only response was a faint, shuddering breath that was a whisper of pain. Barely alive. A knot of ice formed in Ella's stomach. They weren't just hurt, they were dying. And she and Rex were the only souls who knew. Ella's own breath hitched in a sob as she knelt, the cold seeping mercilessly through her clothes. The female agent's eyelashes were fused with ice-tiny crystals glittering on her pale cheeks. Ella reached out with a trembling hand and gently brushed the snow from the woman's face. Her skin was as cold as marble. "Please wake up," Ella pleaded, her voice cracking with desperation. There was no response. The man beside her was in even worse shape. His head lolled forward, his breathing shallow and ragged. Each gasp was a battle. Ella touched his arm and recoiled. The cold she felt was bone-deep, terrifying. Rex, he pressed his cold nose against the agent's face, sniffing with a frantic urgency, nudging her shoulder. Then her limp hand, his whines growing more piercing. Ella could feel the raw desperation in his cries. He knew their time was running out. "Rex, what are we going to do?" she choked out. In response, Rex let out a sharp, commanding bark that echoed off the cold brick walls. A cascade of snowflakes shook loose from the ledge above. He barked again and again, a desperate plea, but the raging storm swallowed every sound. No one was coming. Ella bit her lip until it stung. She would not cry. Her dad always said crying wastes precious time when someone needs help, so she forced her mind to work. The foam, their pale skin, the shallow breaths. "They're poisoned." She breathed the word hanging like ice in the air. Saying it aloud made her chest ache with a terrible certainty. She looked at them again, wondering how long they'd been lying here, bound and helpless, as the cold relentlessly drained their strength. She ripped off her mittens, pressing her small, warm palms against the woman's cheek, trying to rub some life back into her frozen skin. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered, "You're not going to die. Rex and I will help you." The woman's frozen lips parted, releasing a faint, wheezing breath. A tiny flicker of hope ignited in Ella. She turned to the man. He was slumped in an awkward heap, ropes cutting into his heavy coat, his chest barely rising. Ella crawled closer and pressed her hand over his heart. Nothing. Then, a faint, shallow thump. Ella gasped. "He's alive." Rex paced, frantically circling the agents, then bolting to the mouth of the alley and back, as if pleading with Ella to run for safety. But he would not abandon them. He stayed, always returning to nudge their unmoving hands with his wet nose. Ella reached into her coat pocket. Her small hands trembled as she retrieved her scarf. She carefully wrapped it around the woman's neck, tucking it tightly against the biting wind. Then she pulled off her own hat and settled it on the man's head. The cold stung her ears instantly, but she ignored it. "Please stay alive," she pleaded. The snow fell, thicker. The wind cut like a knife. The alley sank deeper into darkness. Ella had no idea how much time the FBI agents had left. But she knew one thing for certain. If she gave up on them, they wouldn't make it. And she refused to let that happen. Only hours earlier, everything had been normal, warm and safe, a world away from the danger that was now swallowing her whole. The memory came to her, in soft, gentle fragments drifting through her mind like the swirling snow. Ella had spent the afternoon at her grandmother's cozy little house on the other side of town. The whole living room smelled of fresh cinnamon cookies, and the fire crackled warmly as she and her grandma played a board game. Outside, the sky was gray, but deceptively calm. No one expected the storm to hit so soon. Her father, Officer Daniels, had stopped by for a moment during his patrol break. His uniform was lightly dusted with the first snowflakes of the day, and his whole face lit up the moment Ella launched into his arms. Rex stood right at his heels, his tail wagging proudly as if he were reporting for duty. "You two having fun?" he asked, ruffling Ella's hair. She giggled. "Grandma let me have 2 cookies." Her father feigned a dramatic gasp. "2, that's strictly against the official cookie law." Grandma's laugh echoed from the kitchen. "She's with me. I outrank your cookie law." It was warm. It was safe. Ella couldn't imagine a single thing going wrong. But then a harsh crackle came from the radio on her father's shoulder. Urgent. A crackle of static, then a voice demanding immediate backup. Officer Daniels pressed his earpiece, his gaze hardening. "Copy that. I'm en route." Ella saw the change instantly. The father vanished, replaced by the officer. He knelt before her, taking her small hands in his. "Sweetheart, I have to go help someone. Rex will get you home. You stick right beside him, okay?" Ella nodded, her heart sinking a little. Beside her, Rex sat at attention, a silent, furry soldier. Her father gave Rex's collar a firm squeeze. "Protect her. No shortcuts unless you have to." A single sharp bark was Rex's vow. Grandma helped Ella pull on her heavy coat and boots. "That storm's coming in early, dear. Be safe." Ella wrapped her arms around her. "Love you, Grandma." The moment they stepped outside, the wind bit at Ella's cheeks. The snow was already falling thicker, harder. Rex nudged her on his presence, a steady guide. But halfway there, the blizzard exploded around them. The roads vanished under ice. Visibility dropped to near zero as people scrambled for shelter. Rex stopped assessing the path. And then he pulled them toward the alley. Ella remembered the nervous tug on his leash. "Are you sure?" Rex glanced back, his eyes sharp and unwavering. She trusted him with her life. What she couldn't know was that her father was racing to a violent crime scene, one tied to the very FBI agents now bleeding out before her. The storm hadn't just herded them into that alley. Fate had. The blizzard intensified, turning the narrow passage into a blinding vortex of white. Ella dragged a woolen sleeve across her face, blinking away the ice crystals that clung to her eyelashes. Her gaze shifted from one fallen agent to the other, her heart hammering painfully against her small ribs. The woman's breathing became a series of shallow, ragged gasps, her chest heaving in a desperate fight for air. A fine layer of frost was forming on her eyebrows, her lips quivering with every fading exhale. Ella moved closer, pressing her small hands to the woman's cheeks, a futile attempt to share her own warmth. Don't you stop breathing, Ella," pleaded through chattering teeth. Rex nudged the agent's coat, then laid his head against her chest, listening intently. A soft whine escaped him before he turned to the man beside her. He lowered his head, sniffing at his mouth, his neck, and then at the ropes that cut deep into his torso. Ella watched, her eyes wide with terror. Suddenly, Rex's entire demeanor shifted. He backed away, his tail tucked, and let out a sharp, urgent bark. He circled the man, sniffing frantically, and then nudged his shoulder in a desperate plea for him to stir. The man was still. Ella crept closer, her hand brushing across his forehead. It was colder than the snow. She pressed her fingers under his jaw, searching for a pulse, the way her father taught her in a lesson that had felt so distant then. Nothing. Then, a single, slow, faint beat. A shaky breath escaped Ella's lips. "Please hold on." But it was only getting worse. A trickle of the same frozen foam escaped the corner of the man's mouth. His breaths were now terrifyingly far apart. Ella held her own just to see if he was breathing at all. She moved in, wrapping her small arms around his torso, trying to shield him with her own body heat. Even then, she knew it wasn't nearly enough. Rex barked again, louder this time. He darted to the alley's entrance and then back, and forward once more, in a frantic dance of indecision. He was desperate to run for help, but he would not dare leave Ella's side. The agents. Tears welled in Ella's eyes. "Rex, they're not going to make it." The words shattered in her throat as she gazed down at their snow-dusted hands, their ghostly pale faces, the cruel ropes biting deep into their jackets. The person responsible for this hadn't merely restrained them. They'd left them here to freeze, or worse. Ella desperately chafed her own numb fingers, a frantic search of her pockets for anything at all to help. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Her scarf was already wrapped around the woman's neck. Her own hat warmed the man's head. Her gloves were lost. Now even her coat felt paper-thin. The Awaye female agent suddenly uttered a faint, pained moan, a sound so fragile the storm nearly stole it. But Rex heard it. His ears instantly perked. He hurried to the woman's side, nudging her gloved hand and whining with a deep concern. Ella swallowed past a lump in her throat and rested her forehead against the woman's shoulder. "Please, someone find us," she pleaded in a whisper. But only silence answered, and the Aya agent's breathing grew shallower, fading with each moment. The storm raged its wind, a razor blade slicing through the alley with a final warning that their time was slipping away. Ella's fingers, numb and shaking, fumbled to pull her thin jacket tighter around her. Small frame, but her gaze remained locked on the two FBI agents sinking deeper into the snow. Rex let out another bark, sharp and filled with urgency and desperation. He refused to give up, and in her heart, Ella knew she couldn't either. With a trembling hand, she reached for the tiny red button on Rex's collar. It was the emergency beacon her father had insisted on months ago. She had never once used it before. She prayed this was not the first and last time. Pressing it once, a small click echoed under her thumb. Then a soft green light began to blink on his collar. Rex went still, his ears twitching as the beacon pulsed, sending out its silent plea. Ella held her breath, her eyes fixed on the pulsing light. "Daddy said this calls for help." She whispered, a flicker of hope rising, but the storm was a monster. Blinding snow whipped down the alley. The wind's howl was deafening, drowning out any possible response. The city felt a world away, too far. She pressed the button again, her desperation growing. Blink, blink, blink. Still there was no sound. No answer. No sirens wailing in the distance. Her throat closed up. Hot tears burned her frozen eyes as she pressed her bare hands against her cheeks, trying to hold back a sob. If that signal didn't make it through, then the officers, they would be gone. No. She couldn't let herself think it. She angrily wiped the tears on her sleeve and fought to control her, shuddering breaths. "Rex," she whispered, her voice tight. "Stay. I have to try something else." Rex whined softly, but he obeyed, planting himself like a loyal sentinel beside the fading agent. Ella struggled to her feet. Her legs trembled as the cold stabbed, like knives through her thin socks. She trudged to the alley's entrance, cupped her frozen hands to her mouth, and screamed into the gale. "Help, is anyone out there, please?" But her small voice was instantly devoured by the wind. Snow pelted her face. Her throat was raw as she screamed again, with all her might, her lungs burning, but the blizzard swallowed every last sound. She stumbled back to the agents, utterly defeated, and collapsed in the snow beside them. "No one can hear us." Rex gently pressed his head against Ella's arm, sensing her despair, and then his ears twitched. He lifted his head, his nose testing the frigid air. He stared intently toward the mouth of the alley, barking with a renewed and fierce determination, but Ella couldn't perceive what he had sensed. Her gaze fell back to the agents. The man's breathing was now just a whisper. The woman's eyelids fluttered, a fragile battle to stay conscious. Ella clutched the agent's icy hand, her voice a mere whisper. "Just hold on. My dad's coming. I know he is." But a cold doubt began to seep into her plea, as minutes stretched into an eternity. Ella wrapped herself around the agent's arm, trying to share her own warmth. "Please, please don't go," she murmured a desperate prayer. Rex's beacon pulsed relentlessly, each fragile light battling the fury of the storm. Blizzard. Then a sharp bark from Rex cut through the wind, a sound like a command. Ella's head snapped up. Could it be? Just maybe, someone had finally heard their call. For a fleeting instant, the storm's fury seemed to hush, as if holding its breath to listen. Ella raised her head, wiping melting snow from her lashes. A shift in the air, a new presence. Rex sensed it too. His ears swiveled, locking into place. His entire body went rigid, every muscle coiling tight like a drawn bowstring. And then Ella heard it. A crunch. The sound of one heavy foot pressing into the snow. The air caught in her lungs. A low growl rumbled deep in Rex's chest, a menacing sound she had almost never heard. He moved in front of her without a thought, placing his powerful frame between her and the silhouette taking shape at the alley's mouth. Ella strained her eyes against the swirling snow. A figure materialized from the white curtain, tall and cloaked in darkness, advancing with an eerie calm that sliced right through her soul. His heavy boots plunged into the drifts with each deliberate step, leaving dark wounds in the snow. His hood was drawn down, obscuring his face, but Ella saw enough. The broad set of his shoulders, the confident way he stood, a flash of cold metal at his hip. This was no stranger. He wasn't lost. He was returning. Ella's heart pounded against her ribs like a drum. Her fingers tangled deep in Rex's fur. Rex's growl intensified, his lips curling back to bare his teeth. The man paused, gazing down at the two fallen agents, then his eyes settled on Ella. "Well now," he said, his voice a blade of ice. "This is an unexpected complication?" Ella's breath hitched in her chest. Words failed her. She was paralyzed. The man tilted his head, studying her like an irritating problem to be solved. "You really shouldn't be here, little girl." Rex took another step forward, creating an unwavering wall between Ella and the threat. Fresh snowflakes began to dust his dark fur. His growl was a low rumble of thunder. The man's lips twisted into a cruel smirk. So the mutt led them here, did he, clever boy? Too clever. For his own good. Ella swallowed against the knot of fear in her throat, her mind racing. She was trapped, unsure if running would only make things worse. The man advanced again, the snow groaning under his weight. These agents were never supposed to wake up. He mumbled more to himself than to her. And now look at you spoiling the whole plan. Rex's sharp bark was a clear warning. The man's eyes narrowed to slits. Back off, dog. His hand slid inside his coat. No! Ella shrieked, lunging to grab hold of Rex's collar, her heart exploding with panic. Rex held his ground, his growl swelling like a storm. But it wasn't a weapon the man produced, but a small, silver vial. He turned it over in his gloved fingers. Should have used a stronger dose. They woke up before. Ice flooded Ella's veins. He wasn't just their attacker. He was the one who poisoned them. Rex barked again, hackles raised his body, braced to spring forward. The man took a final step, lifting the vial. Sorry, kid. You were never part of the plan. A sudden gust of snow swirled through the air. In that instant, Rex became a blur of motion. He sprang with incredible power, launching himself directly at the man targeting the arm, holding the vial. The man staggered backward in shock, the vial tumbling from his grasp. Ella screamed as her loyal friend slammed into the assailant, sending him into the snow. The storm stole her cries, but Rex ran on pure instinct, on raw strength, and it surged through him. The man crashed into the snow with a bone-jarring thud, Rex's weight a bolt of living fury, striking him down. The silver vial was flung from his hand, a glint of metal swallowed by the swirling white. A ragged grunt tore from the man as Rex pinned him, fangs inches from his throat, his growl a low, vibrating promise. Ella watched, frozen, her eyes wide with terror. This wasn't her gentle friend. This was a trained warrior, a protector, a police canine operating on pure defensive instinct. The man thrashed beneath him. Get off me, he spat, reaching for something concealed within his coat. Rex reacted in a flash. His jaws seized the man's wrist, clamping down, not to break the bone, but to stop his desperate reach. The man howled in pain. Ella cried out, "Rex, be careful!" But her partner knew his duty. The man shoved his free hand into the snow, grasping a jagged piece of ice, and swung it viciously at Rex's head. Rex dodged, releasing his hold just long enough to evade the blow. The man fought up, slipping, gasping for air, his coat caked with snow. "Stupid mutt," he hissed, wiping his mouth. Rex's growl deepened, laced with fury. The man charged. Rex was faster. He dodged, then drove forward, tackling the man again. Across the ice, they skidded several feet, snow exploding around them like shattered crystal. Ella watched, trembling, as Rex fought with focused control. Every move was precise, but his opponent was not done. He twisted with sudden force, throwing Rex off balance for a heartbeat, just enough time to reach into his coat again. Ella's own heart stopped. This time, his hand emerged with a knife. "Back off, dog," he screamed, the blade catching the alley's flickering light. Rex snarled and stood his ground, a shield between the blade and Ella. She stumbled back, a hand flying to her throat. The man raised the knife high. Rex gave one thunderous bark and lunged. The blade slashed through the empty air, narrowly missing his neck. Rex's jaws found the man's arm, his entire body twisting with the momentum of the takedown. The man lost, the knife with a sharp clatter, his curses swallowed by the storm. Rex refused to let go, dragging the man down, pinning him again, powerful paws on his chest. Snow covered them as he held his ground, growling with a rumble that seemed to shake the very earth. Ella gasped, spotting the knife glimmering near her. She ran to it, her hands shaking as she kicked it deep into a snowbank out of reach. The man's struggles were weakening now. "Let me go!" He wheezed under Rex's weight. Rex growled louder, and then new sounds, footsteps many fast, and urgent voices cutting through the blizzard. "Please stay where you are. K9 unit. Show me your hands. We see." "The girl. We're moving in." Ella's head snapped toward the sound. She saw shadows, uniforms, flashlight beams slicing the darkness. He had done it. Help was finally here. Flashing red and blue lights flooded the narrow alley painting. The snow in frantic colors. The wind carried the shouts of officers as heavy boots pounded the ground. Ella blinked through the storm, her breath catching with relief as uniforms emerged from the haze. "There, the K9 has him!" an officer yelled. A firm voice cut in. "Secure the suspect! Move in, move!" And within seconds they were there. Two officers charged forward, guns drawn, their eyes wide as they absorbed the scene, Rex pinning the suspect while Ellis trembled beside the fallen FBI agents, snow swirling like a ghostly curtain around them. "Rex off," a familiar voice commanded. Ella gasped. "Daddy!" Officer Daniels barreled toward her, snow exploding from his boots. His face was pale, his eyes frantic. Before he reached her, Rex obeyed, instantly releasing the criminal and stepping back to Ella, positioning his body protectively beside her. Two officers tackled the criminal, forcing him down and wrenching his arms, behind him snapping cold cuffs around his wrists. The man spat curses into the snow, but he was too weak, too beaten to resist. Officer Daniels collapsed to his knees before Ella, cupping her small face between his gloved hands. "Ella, honey, are you hurt?" His voice cracked with emotion. She shook her head fiercely. "Daddy, the agents, they've been poisoned. They need help." Her father's gaze shot to the FBI officers collapsed against the wall ropes, digging into their frost-caked jackets. The color drained from his face. "Medic team now," he roared over his shoulder. Paramedics sprinted forward with their bags and equipment, kneeling by the agents, slicing through the ropes in seconds. Flashlight beams revealed their pallid skin, frozen foam on their lips and chests that barely rose. Male agent barely. A pulse. Females got shallow breathing, possible hypothermia stage 2. Toxin indicators present prepping an antidote kit. The alley transformed into a controlled frenzy of hands commands and flashing lights. Ella backed up, against Rex, gripping his fur, as paramedics lifted the agents onto stretchers, wrapping them in thermal blankets. She saw the female agent's head loll weakly, her lips parting with faint, shattered breaths. Officer Daniels gently pulled Ella to his chest, hugging her with all his might. "My brave girl, how did you find them?" Ella pointed at Rex. "He did. He led me right here." Daniels looked at Rex, his loyal K9 partner, and shook his head in utter disbelief. "You saved them, both of you." Rex pressed his head against Daniels' leg, whining softly as he watched the medic's desperate work. A paramedic shouted, "Ready for transport, move." And just like that, the race for their lives had begun. The alley erupted into a flurry of motion as paramedics rushed the stretchers toward the waiting ambulances. Snow whipped around them in a blinding curtain, clinging to jackets and gear. Their voices cut through the storm, sharp, urgent, and strained with fear. "Male agent's pulse is dropping. Female agent's breathing is irregular. Prep oxygen. Get that antidote ready. We might only have minutes." Ella clung to her father's coat as he guided her and Rex behind the throng of medics. Her small boots crunched through the snow with every frantic step. Rex stayed fused to her side, his entire body tense, his ears pinned back. Even he could feel the life-or-death urgency now. His breath came in rapid, visible clouds of steam. One of the paramedics knelt by the stretcher, steadying the male agent while inserting an IV needle into a blue-tinged vein in his arm. Another placed a mask over his face, squeezing an oxygen bag with a steady rhythm. "Come on," the medic muttered. "Stay with me." The female agent's stretcher was surrounded by 3 paramedics working furiously, one monitoring her vitals, another preparing an antidote syringe, and a third. Another worked to warm her frozen skin with specialized heating packs. "We're losing her," someone yelled. "We have to move now." Ella's heart pounded in her chest. Daddy, are they going to make it? Her voice fractured, almost lost in the storm. Officer Daniels knelt beside her, his hands a gentle weight on her shoulders. His gaze was soft, yet etched with strain. We are going to do everything in our power to save them, sweetheart. But they are desperately ill. Ella glanced at the female agent's ashen face, and a memory seized her, brushing the snow from the woman's cheeks. How cold her skin felt. How eerily still. If Rex hadn't found them, Ella whispered, they would have... Her father pulled her into a fierce, protective hug. You and Rex saved their lives. You gave them a fighting chance. That means more than you'll ever know. Behind them, Rex paced a low whine in his throat as he watched the medics secure medical equipment. He moved in closer, nudging the female agent's arm with his nose, a silent plea for her to keep fighting. A paramedic noticed. He's worried sick, the medic said quietly. He's the one who found them. Officer, Daniel said. He knew something was wrong before any of us. The medic nodded, his expression full of respect. Good boy. You bought us the time we needed. A shout came from the lead ambulance. We're losing the male agent, let's go. The back doors flew open. The stretchers were shoved inside. Monitors shrieked. Oxygen hissed. The sound of the battle for life filled the alley. Ella's breath caught. Can we go with them? Her father shook his head. Gently. We will follow right behind in my cruiser. They need room to work. The ambulance engines thundered to life, snow, spraying from the tires as the first one lurched forward, its lights painting the alley in frantic flashes of color. Rex pressed, his trembling body against Ella's leg. As the ambulances tore into the storm sirens, wailing into the night, one chilling truth settled over Ella like a shroud of ice. This fight was far from over, and every second counted. The emergency room doors burst open as paramedics stormed inside with the stretchers, their urgent voices echoing down the bright, sterile corridor. The sudden warmth was a jarring shock after the freezing alley. Ella clung tightly to her father's hand. As they followed the whirlwind of motion, Rex trotted close, his nails clicking softly on the polished linoleum. Get toxicology. Ready? We need trauma. 1, now he's crashing. Get me EPI. Stat? Core? Temp is critical, we need warming blankets. Immediately. Yeah. Doctors and nurses converged on the agents, a blur of fast, precise, practiced movements. The stretchers were rushed into 2 adjoining emergency rooms. Curtains whipped closed behind them as the medical teams began the fight to stabilize their failing bodies. Ella stood rooted to the spot in the hallway, her eyes fixed on the final swaying curtain. Her small fingers tightened around her father's hand until her knuckles were bone white. Daddy, are they going to be okay? She breathed. He knelt, drawing her into a protective embrace. His uniform smelled of the cold air and the storm, a scent that usually brought her comfort. But tonight, not even his warmth could soothe the deep ache in her heart. They are in the best possible place, he murmured. The doctors are giving it everything they have. Ella rested her head against his shoulder, silent tears finally slipping down her cheeks. They were so cold. I tried to help them. I took off my hat and my scarf. Her father's eyes squeezed shut as he swallowed hard. You did more than any kid should ever have to. You were so brave, so unbelievably brave. Rex gently nudged Ella's back with his nose, a soft whine escaping him. She turned, burying herself in his embrace, thick coat, her face hidden in the warmth of his neck. Rex rested his head on her shoulder, his tail perfectly still. The sterile hallway. Lights hummed overhead. Faint beeps from distant monitors echoed from behind closed doors as nurses rushed in and out of rooms, their arms full of charts and medicine. The world was a blur of motion, but for Ella, time had frozen. Trapped in a moment she prayed wasn't real. A nurse approached, her eyes kind above her mask. Sweetheart, she said in a gentle voice, the agents are in very good hands. I saw what you did out there. You and your dog, You may have truly saved their lives. Ella sniffled, her voice barely a whisper. Will they wake up? We're trying, the nurse replied with gentle honesty. Their bodies have been through something. Incredibly severe, but they are fighters. Ella nodded slowly, wiping her eyes. She leaned into Rex again, feeling the solid rhythm of his steady heartbeat against her arm. Her father wrapped a comforting arm around her as they sat down on a hard, plastic bench outside the emergency room. The air was heavy with the scent of disinfectant and a quiet urgency. Tiny snowflakes still clung to Ella's jacket, melting into dark, damp patches. She stared at the drawn curtains as she prayed the agents would keep fighting long enough to open their eyes again. Hours bled into one another like slow shadows across the hospital walls. Ella sat curled up next to Rex on the bench, her father's arm a steady presence. Every few minutes, a doctor or nurse would hurry past, but none of them stopped with an update. The weight of waiting felt heavier than the storm. Raging outside, finally the curtain to one of the rooms slid open. A doctor stepped out, peeling off his gloves, his face a pale mask of exhaustion. Ella straightened instantly, her heart hammering so hard she could feel the pulse in her throat. Are they okay? She breathed. The doctor crouched to meet her gaze. They are stable for now. They're both extremely weak, but they have responded to the antidotes. He exhaled, shaking his head. It is a miracle they were found when they were. Ella looked down at Rex, who let out a low whine and nudged her hand. He found them, she whispered with a surge of pride. Officer Daniels nodded. Rex alerted my daughter and led her straight to the alley. The doctor's eyebrows rose. That dog saved 2 federal agents today. Before Ella could say a word, the sound of determined footsteps echoed down the hall. A tall, grim-faced man in a dark coat approached his badge, catching the fluorescent light. FBI. He stopped directly in front of Officer Daniels. I'm Special Agent Monroe. I was assigned to the same unit as Agents Keller and Harris, the 2 your daughter found tonight. Ella's breath caught in her throat. This man looked serious, official, and utterly exhausted. He knelt down in front of her. Ella, is that right? She nodded. He took a long, slow breath. I need to tell you something. Something that those 2 agents couldn't tell anyone before the attack. Ella leaned forward, listening intently. Today, he said, his voice low and grave. They were transporting evidence from a major criminal operation, one we have been trying to dismantle for months. A high-level network of illicit trade, dangerous men with access to toxins, armaments, and so much to lose. Ella's fingers twisted into Rex's fur. The suspect who attacked them tonight was a part of that organization, Monroe continued. He ambushed Agents Keller and Harris, bound them, and deployed a fast-acting synthetic poison on them, leaving them in that alley to perish. His jaw clenched. They weren't meant to survive. A chill ran down Ella's spine. Monroe gazed at her, a flicker of admiration easing his hardened expression. But because you and Rex discovered them, they now have a chance, a fighting chance. Without the 2 of you, he shook his head slowly. They wouldn't have lasted another 10 minutes. Ella blinked, the gravity of his words sinking in. Rex held his head high with pride. Agent Monroe placed a hand over his own heart. On behalf of the entire FBI, thank you. Ella was speechless, simply wrapping her arms tighter around Rex, and held on tight. Morning light poured through the hospital windows, its soft golden glow dissolving the harshness of the previous night. The storm had broken, leaving a serene, quiet world in its wake. Ella sat on that same hallway bench, her head resting against Rex's warm body. Sleep had been scarce, but exhaustion was irrelevant. She wouldn't leave until she knew the agents were truly safe. Rex stirred beside her, lifting his head. His ears perked up, ever alert, ever hopeful. Ella sat up straight just as the curtain to the female agent's room slid open. A nurse emerged, offering them a gentle, warm smile. "She's awake," the nurse whispered. Ella gasped, her small hands flying to her mouth. "Really?" The nurse nodded. "Both of them are conscious. They're weak, but they're awake, and they are asking to see you." Ella glanced up at her father, who nodded gently. "Go on, sweetheart." Rex was on his feet, instantly staying close by her side as she followed the nurse into the room. The air smelled of antiseptic and warm linen. The soft, rhythmic beeping of monitors punctuated the silence. Agent Harris, the female, Agent was propped against her pillows, pale, yet managing a smile. Her eyes shimmered with a mix of profound gratitude and utter disbelief. Her voice was just a whisper, barely a breath. You little hero." Tears welled in Ella's eyes as she timidly stepped closer. "I'm just so glad you're okay." Agent Harris reached out with a trembling hand, and Ella gently placed her small palm within it. The agent squeezed softly, tears tracing paths down her cheeks. "You saved my life," she whispered. "If you and your dog hadn't found us..." Ella quickly shook her head. "Rex found you. I was just following him." Agent Harris's gaze shifted to the loyal German shepherd. Rex lifted, his paw resting it on the edge of the bed as he leaned in. Harris stroked his noble head, her voice cracking. "Such a good boy. You're a true hero." In the next bed, Agent Keller, the male agent, slowly turned his head to look at Ella. He managed to give a faint, weary smile. "I heard you. Gave me your hat," he mumbled. "No one's ever done that for me before." Ella blushed. "You looked cold." Keller let out a weak chuckle. "Because of you, I get to see another sunrise." Ella's throat tightened with a surge of emotion. Just then, Agent Monroe came into the room holding a small velvet box and a formal envelope. He cleared his throat gently. "Ahem. On behalf of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." Ella's eyes grew wide. "We would like to present Ella with an honorary citizen's commendation for courage beyond her years and for saving 2 of our own." He opened the small velvet box. Inside lay a small silver badge engraved with her name. Ella covered her mouth, utterly stunned. "And for Rex," Monroe added, turning with a broad grin, "we have a Medal of Valor." Rex began to wag his tail so hard the entire bed frame shook, the room filled with gentle laughter, tears, and overwhelming relief. For the first time since that terrifying night, everything finally felt right again. The sun was hanging low in the sky when Ella and Rex finally left the hospital. The world was reborn, shimmering under a fresh coat of snow. The storm had hushed the city into a silent, glittering expanse. A sharp, clean breath filled Ella's lungs as she clutched her father's hand. Rex strode proudly beside her, the Medal of Valor ribbon knotted carefully around his collar. Just past the doorway, news cameras waited. Reporters whispered in anticipation as they saw the small girl and her loyal dog. Officer Daniels placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Ready," he murmured. Ella gave a shy nod. As they moved forward, a sea of microphones aimed at them. One reporter knelt down to meet Ella's gaze. "Honey, the whole world wants to know, what's it like to be a hero?" Ella paused, her eyes finding Rex. He gave her hand a gentle nudge, a silent encouragement. She drew a breath. "I'm not the hero," she said softly. "Rex is. He's the one who found them. He saved their lives." A murmur swept through the crowd, clearly touched. Rex's tail wagged with pride as he pressed close to Ella's legs. The reporter's smile was warm. "Well then, you must be the bravest little girl we know because you had the courage to follow him." A blush colored Ella's cheeks as she glanced at her father, who offered a reassuring nod. As more questions came, 2 dark vehicles glided into the driveway, unmarked black SUVs. Their doors swung open, and out stepped Agents Harris and Keller, bundled in heavy coats, looking frail but smiling. Ella let out a gasp. "They're out of the hospital." Agent Harris walked toward her, taking small, careful steps. "The doctor said we just had to see you. They let us out for a little while." Ella rushed, to her embracing her, gently mindful of her injuries. Harris returned the hug, her own eyes filling with tears. "You saved our lives," she whispered once more. Agent Keller knelt down by Rex, scratching that spot right behind his ears. "And you, my friend, I owe you my life." Rex gave his hand a grateful lick, his tail thumping with pride. Agent Monroe approached, a warm look on his face. "We had a discussion back at the Bureau," he announced. "And as of today, Ella and Rex will be officially recognized as honorary members of our Special Task Force. The door will always be open for you to visit." Ella's eyes lit up. "Really? Really?" Monroe confirmed with a grin. Officer Daniels rested a hand on her shoulder, beaming with pride. "You did a good thing, kiddo." Ella threw her arms around Rex, burying her face deep in his fur. "We did it together." The cameras flashed relentlessly. Delicate snowflakes danced down through the air, and just behind them, a gentle sunrise began to paint the sky in shades of gold. And in that moment, one truth was certain. Heroes don't always carry a badge. Sometimes they wear tiny snow boots and walk beside a loyal dog who will never give in.